And Lent begins this week. So next Sunday, we will be taking part in these bodybuilding sessions. If you have not had a chance to indicate your preference yet, there is a sign-up board in the foyer, or you can do so electronically using the SurveyMonkey link that has come to your inbox through various e-blasts, or you can email Rosemary in the church office. I'm excited about this experiment that we're going to be on together. One of the things that I appreciate about the way that the liturgical calendar is structured is that right before we enter each of the major holy seasons, we are reminded of the bigger picture of the gospel and the larger reality of who Christ is. You may remember that before Advent began, back at the end of November, we observed Christ the King Sunday to remind us that this cute little baby, this little child for whom we will spend the next 4 weeks waiting expectantly during that season of Advent, be reminded of who that child truly is, the King with a capital K, the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords, glorified and enthroned over all creation. And likewise today, before we enter the holy season of Lent, we pass through once again what is termed Transfiguration Sunday. This Sunday where we consider this story from Matthew 17 to be reminded of Christ's light and radiance, the fullness of His heavenly divinity, before we spend the next 40 days reflecting soberly on the reality of our own earthly mortality. The Transfiguration is the name that is given to this story, found in Matthew 17. It's also found in Luke and Mark, in which Jesus takes His three closest disciples, Peter and James and John. He takes them aside and leads them up a mountain where in a vision they see Him transformed into a being of blinding light. Matthew says His face shines like the sun and His clothes become dazzling white. Moreover, Jesus has company in this vision. The prophets Moses and Elijah appear beside Him, and the three of them strike up a conversation, though we are not privy to anything that they said to one another. Peter, in particular, is blown away and offers to make dwellings or booths, temporary structures like the ones the Israelites lived in during the Exodus from Egypt out in the wilderness. He offers to make these booths for them so that they can stay for a while. But just then, a bright cloud passes over the mountain, and a voice reminiscent of what occurred when Jesus was baptized by John in the Jordan River, a voice declares, "This is my Son, the beloved. Listen to Him." And at this point, Peter and James and John, they can't handle it anymore. They're overcome with fear. They're absolutely losing it. But Jesus touches them reassuringly, and when they open their eyes, it's just Him. Just as He was before, just as He's always been, just as they have always known Him. And when they've got their wits about them again, Jesus leads them back down the mountain and swears them to secrecy. Don't tell anyone about this until the Son of Man has been raised from the dead. Which I imagine confused and scared them even more. But after what they had witnessed, they must have known they were in for some surprises. It's an amazing story. And more than an amazing story, it's an amazing gift. It's an amazing gift that Jesus grants these three select disciples, one long recognized as very important by the church because it is recounted in 3 of the 4 Gospels. It's an experience both frightening and reassuring, but one worth remembering. Because these disciples, Peter, James, and John, they've left everything to follow this man, Jesus. And if they were having doubts about that choice, about whether this rabbi was someone truly special, this experience would have put them to rest. It certainly would have put them to rest for me. But this story, this experience, isn't just a gift for them, it's a gift for all of us. Because by recording and telling this story, the gospel writers have brought us along for this journey too. They've brought us into the loop, into this special inner circle. It's not just for the select few after Jesus has been risen from the dead. So reading this story right before Lent it's an act of reassurance for us as well. Reassurance of what lies on the other side of this approaching season of self-denial and self-examination. And so as we wrap up our look at bodybuilding in preparation to start engaging in some bodybuilding next week, I want us to take a look at this Transfiguration story as recounted by Matthew through the particular lens of Gary Gunderson's Leading Causes of Life. Because, number one, Gunderson's work is insightful, but number two, I think the story of the Transfiguration really captures and illuminates what the first and last of Gunderson's 5 causes of life are all about, what he calls coherence and blessing. Now, you may be asking yourself, why should we care about what Gary Gunderson thinks? Well, life is what bodybuilding is all about. Life is what the gospel is all about. As Jesus goes about his work, goes about his ministry, what he does is bestow life in his wake. And if we are his people, if we are his disciples, that's what we should do too, as we go about our work as Kingsway Baptist Church. And in order to do that, in order to really do that, we need to understand the things that make for life and work to cultivate them, both inside our walls and outside in the wider world. And I think that's what Gary Gunderson helps us with. What coherence and blessing are both really about is belonging, just on different planes, on different levels. Coherence is belonging from a bird's eye view. It points to the fact that there is a deeper, wider, more expansive reality at work around us and within us. Coherence is about this bigger question, these bigger questions of life. The ones like John Matthews and Caroline Cho are going to be giving you the opportunity to explore in their upcoming bodybuilding session. Coherence is the why of life. Why does any of this matter? And the story of the Transfiguration, for us as Christians, is specifically about the why of Jesus. There is something deeper here, something wider, something more wonderful. We may not fully understand it. We may not be able to fully articulate it, ever, but it's there. And it's something that gives this journey a through line. It's something that holds it together. It's something that makes it worthwhile. Because Jesus is this deeper, higher, wider reality. Blessing is about belonging too, but it's on a more ground view level. There's a through line that connects past, present, and future. But it's tangible because blessing is always embodied. It comes in the form of other people, our brothers and sisters, those younger than us and those older than us. We don't exist in isolation. We're not intended to. That's why we're called to be the church together. And part of what we have to remember is that this gospel story of Jesus that we tell, that we give our lives to, that we're devoted to here at Kingsway Baptist Church, this gospel story is part of a longer narrative of God's presence and work in the world, embodied by the presence of Moses and Elijah in the story of Jesus' transfiguration. God has long been about leading God's people to freedom. God has long been about calling God's people out and calling them back to the ways that God calls us to walk in. Jesus' face glows, reminiscent of the way that Moses' face glowed when he was in the presence of God on Mount Sinai. There's a direct connection, a through line, a lineage shared by these two stories because they are part of one larger narrative arc. And there's another leading cause of life connection to blessing here too, though. Both Moses and Elijah are leaders who directly bless and hand off the mantle of their leadership to those who come after them. Moses lays hands on Joshua, and the book of Deuteronomy says that the people listened to Joshua after Moses died because Moses had blessed him and said, "This is the guy whom God has called to take this up and to lead you on once my time is over." Likewise, the story of Elijah. This is, in fact, where this image, this phrase, this metaphor of passing on the mantle of leadership literally comes from. Because after Elijah is taken up into heaven, Elisha picks up the mantle that Elijah carried with him and puts it on and carries on Elijah's work. It's a continuation of the same mission, the same story, the same ministry. And so this thing about legacy, about lineage, is it reaches in two directions. It reaches into the past, but it also moves into the future. And that's what James and Peter and John represent in this story. They are the future. Blessing doesn't have to be a formal gesture or involve a formal ceremony of some kind. Blessing's really just about affirmation and connection. Jesus has blessed Peter and James and John simply by inviting them to come along with him on this retreat in Matthew 17. And I think this serves as a reminder and an example to us. How are we blessing and affirming each other here at Kingsway? How are we inviting each other to come along? And are we taking those invitations seriously when we receive them? We need to. Because that's what you and I are, what we together as the church are. We are the future. We are the ones now blessed in this day and this time, tasked by Jesus with carrying his story forward and passing it on to others. Like Peter and James and John, we've been invited, we've been blessed, we've been led up the mountain. We have seen Jesus for who he truly and deeply is. Also, like Peter and James and John, we've been led back down the mountain. Jesus has led us back down the mountain, back into the world, back to this mission that all those who follow Jesus are called to share in. We have seen Jesus' light, and that light, that flame, that torch has been passed to us for us to carry. This is why seasons like Lent matter. Especially now that we've gotten a foretaste of Easter here on Transfiguration Sunday. Lent is a time of reorientation, a time of preparation, not just to receive the good news of Easter, but to be prepared, to be shaped, to be formed into agents of Easter in a world that still lies at the foot of that mountain in Matthew 17. It's a season that exists for us that we might be grounded more fully and firmly in the glory and the reality of Jesus' divine light, that divine presence that is made flesh in the person of Jesus Christ. It's grounding in this wider glory and deeper reality so that it might shape and guide our life together here at Kingsway. That we might help others to come to know that there is more. There is more love. There is more grace. There is more life. There is life that truly is life. Beyond and beneath the worldly pursuits of riches and status and material things that we are trained in and funneled into by our culture. Things that decay and degrade and ultimately fade. Ashes to ashes, dust to dust. So may we continue, as we enter into this holy season of Lent, may we continue to allow Jesus both to lead us up the mountain and back down it, so that we might see him more fully in all of his light and glory and radiance, but also so that we might be about his business more faithfully and more intentionally down here on the ground in this day, in this place, that we might have life more abundantly and we might help others discover the life that truly is life. For that is what the gospel is all about. Thanks be to God for the invitation to join in his inner circle and to be part of his mission and ministry ongoing in our world. Amen.